continuing on over from the story from the pitch, we have the ticket, um, which starts off again, leaving off where we left off last time, where they think the deal is doomed because one, George blew it up in the meeting, and two, Kramer threw up on Susan, the one executive that George was, asked out on a date, but she was apparently behind the idea. Then also, of course, we have Kramer, who had gotten kicked in the side of the head with Newman's motorcycle helmet on from Joe Davola. And of course, Newman had gotten that speeding ticket from whenever he used Kramer's bad radar detector. So those are all stories that kind of get resolved. We get answers in this episode, the ticket. So the episode starts out with Kramer walking into Jerry's apartment, and he's only shaved one side of his face, and he's only wearing one pants leg, and not the other one. So he was like, Jerry, of course, was trying to search for the remote, and then he looks up and thinks Kramer's playing a joke on him, and which Kramer realizes that he's not himself. And Jerry suggesting him to see a doctor because he thinks it's from that kick to the side of the head. So then George then shows up with a dry cleaning bill, $18 for the vest that Kramer had vomited on. So the three of them start arguing because Kramer says he shouldn't have to pay for it because it was Jerry's expired milk. Jerry's saying, you shouldn't have drank it. George is trying to blame George for it. So then the three of them decide they're going to split it three ways, $6 each. Kramer was still saying random stuff like, yo-yo mom, whatnot, and Jerry tells Kramer to go lie down. He's going to make an appointment with a doctor that day. Well, shortly after he leaves, of course, and of course they're still arguing a little bit. Jerry and George are arguing over, the whole thing, the idea, and how, they think either way they should still take it to a different network. It's not going to settle for the idea. And then Jerry just still thinking, no one's going to go for it, even though Susan was behind the idea. They then get a call from NBC saying they want to have a second meeting, which excites them, and they're heading to the meeting. While they're heading, of course, first off, George had not shaved, claiming that he's just thrown off on his schedule. And then they're trying to catch a cab because they're going to be late. Jerry checks his watch and realizes his watch is 10 minutes slow. And then he goes, I've had this piece of junk. Apparently it was a watch that his parents had gotten him as a gift, but apparently it doesn't keep time right. So he threw it away in the garbage. As they keep walking, not long after, they run into Uncle Leo, who is going on and on and on. And again, we noticed by now, Jerry obviously is not a people person, a long conversation person, especially with his older relatives, that obviously, just he doesn't have the patience for them as the average person would. So obviously, though, they're in a hurry to get to that meeting with the NBC executive. So he tells them, I'm sorry, I gotta go. And Uncle Leo's like, oh, I know a lot of people in show business too. He's actually implying that he doesn't completely believe Jerry, and he's just thinking that he's trying to avoid him. Because he even said, when they first ran into each other, besides the fact he said, hello, because the signature Uncle Leo, hello, as he's saying, why don't you say hello to your uncle? Why don't you say hello to your uncle? And he goes, why don't you ever call your uncle? Typical, stuff you may hear from older people. But, meanwhile, Newman knocks on Kramer's door, and he says that, you're supposed to go to the courthouse with me. And then Kramer, who is just busy shaving, doesn't remember it. Again, because his, memory's thrown off right now because of that kick from Joe Davola. And he goes, I can't go with you. I gotta go to the doctor. And then Newman was just like, no, you're gonna come with me, because you're gonna corroborate my story to get me out of paying for that speeding ticket from his radar detector. And he keeps reminding him, it was my helmet that saved drugs. He says, okay, fine, I'll do it. So Jerry and George go back to NBC. they go to the meeting. And after some, discussion and stuff, which of course, Jerry was worried about running into Joe Davola again, but he didn't. Jerry told George just be a little more flexible with, the story thing. Which, obviously they started implying that, that they will have stories. And just basically say that, the premise of it is basically, a day in the life of Jerry and, stories based off the material he has to state. So, Dalrymple and the rest of the executives say, they'd be interested in working with them. And he said, put a great deal of confidence in this lady's judgment, which, of course, he was replying to Susan, who was behind the idea, even though, once again, you can't tell the fact that, there's something going on with George and Susan, romantically behind the scenes. So, they obviously are excited that they get the deal. Meanwhile, Newman and Kramer make it to the courthouse. And, of course, Newman obviously knows he's dead meat, so he has to come up with a story with Kramer to corroborate. Even though, again, Kramer is not really, healthy in the mind right now because of the Joe Davola kick. So, Newman says when he got the ticket, he was begging to the police officer, saying he needs to get home, his friend's going to die. They come up with the story that Kramer was going to take his life because he was depressed that he was never able to become a banker. So, they go in, they do the thing. Newman gives him his testimony, saying he was doing some volunteer work, which, come on, you really think Newman would do volunteer work, from the goodness of his heart? No, he would not. But, of course, he just explains again why he had to rush home, because Kramer was going to die because he was depressed because he could never become a banker, which, is what they're trying to, cover. So meanwhile, back at NBC, Jerry and George are celebrating, and they're thinking, and George is making some big deal, like, oh, what am I going to get for us, like 50, 60,000, and then he starts comparing himself to Ted Danson, saying, like, you should be making, like, big bucks like Ted Danson. Jerry gets a call on the NBC line, and it's his mom saying that he was being rude to Uncle Leo because he blew him off earlier in the meeting. Which, of course, they go back and forth, make a fuss out of that. And then after he gets off the phone dealing with them, Jerry and George decided to go out to the monks to celebrate. He says, while he's there, I'll call my agent, maybe we'll see how much they offered. And, of course, George keeps saying 50, 60,000. He kept saying Ted Danson money, this, and that. They call the agent, 13,000 in total for the both of them. Not a piece, not 13,000 a piece in total. So 6,500 a piece, basically, which does not sit well for George at all. Even though, like, once again, and of course, he goes off in this big rant about Ted Danson, and Jerry's trying to imply to George, we are just starting out. We're doing a show about nothing. We have no writing, abilities at all. Why would, that's why they're offering a low start for, the salary, which does not sit well with George at all. And, of course, in the meantime, Jerry looks outside, he thinks he sees crazy Joe Davola. And there's a police officer just walks in. So Jerry was asked a police officer, would you mind walking us out to my car because there's a crazy guy who's out to get me? Yeah, sure. Let me just grab a muffin. Well, the muffin turned into a coffee and then other things. And Jerry kept confronting the police officer, why you keep doing this? He goes, you're just going to have to wait, basically. And, of course, then they're saying, this is Elaine's fault because she's out with her psychiatrist in Europe. And it's also Davola's same psychiatrist as well. And he probably didn't give him his medication, which we then see another scene with Elaine and Dr. Reston making out in Europe somewhere. And he now knows for a fact that he definitely did not leave a medication, another thing of Davola's medication, which again, Elaine keeps getting turned on with the fact that he keeps ending their romantic sessions because he's too worried about this guy's medication. Back at the courthouse, however, Kramer was now talking. Now he was staying in line, but then eventually his memory started to slip again, and he has no clue what they're talking about at all. And then him and Newman get into a big argument. And then Newman's demanding her for a recess. The judge is saying, that'll be $75, and then him and Kramer just get into a big argument because Newman's wasn't able to work his way around paying for that speeding ticket. And then finally, Kramer and Newman go to Monk's, where they meet Jerry and George. They run into them and they say how the deal got picked up, and Newman again says, "Oh, how much are you gonna make? Like 50, 60,000?" And George is just like, "The money does not matter," which of course he's not gonna let go, because in the next 2 episodes, George tries to do some negotiating tactics, which does not work for them. At the same time, though, Jerry, well, first off, they asked them to see the Vola out there, which they didn't. But Newman's car was getting ticketed again, and Tug is where it's parked at. And he runs out there saying, he's going to fight this. And then Kramer's like, "I'm a witness, I saw this." And then, of course, Jerry and George are starting to go back and forth on ideas for the pilot, since NBC signed on the deal. And they were saying, "Oh, we should do a show about, vomiting on someone like we did this. Or we should do a show on, what Kramer and Newman are dealing with." But they're both kind of, like saying no to either of the ideas, basically. But so we still have to figure out, of course, what exactly they end up going with for the story of the pilot in future episodes. But, the deal's been made. Well, the deal's been offered. However, George's not crazy about the money. So we'll see how George tries to play tough guy businessman in the next 2 episodes. Only really side note I have for the ticket is that Wayne Knight has mentioned that was actually one of his personal favorite episodes in the series, for a Newman standpoint. Him and Michael Richards both enjoyed doing the team comedy and plotting for a story to be convincing to get him out of paying for that speeding ticket. Newman, to me, just reminds me a lot of someone I went to school with years ago. That, I wouldn't so much say he's like a bully per se, but just more so someone who he says stupid stuff and he tries to weasel his way out of it, and it just doesn't work. I've encountered people like that before. And it's just so obvious that he was just being a coward, and he's not that smart to begin with. So unfortunately, it just bit him in the butt, and Kramer's head injuries unfortunately didn't help him at all either. He gets himself in trouble and it's his own fault, but he just can't escape out of it. But of course, this is the second 2-part episode. The pitch and the ticket, again, were even though it was aired as a 1-hour episode, it pretty much was a 2-part episode. And we have one more 2-part episode coming up next, which is The Wallet and The Watch, are both 2-part episodes. Like I said, I keep saying the ongoing story throughout the entire series, the entire season 4 is going to be the story of them writing the script for the Jerry Show, which again, George's going to be negotiating a little bit with the money in the next 2 episodes. We'll hear about that next as we get to the next review, which will be The Wallet. So guys, what were your thoughts on the ticket? Make sure also, if you have not so, watch the review on The Pitch. As I said, that's a very important show in the series, in my opinion. Very important episode for sure. And just leave your thoughts, of course, as always, down in the comment section below. And be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content to my channel. Follow me on Twitter at DemandAirboy93. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you all later. Have a great rest of your night. And peace out, everybody.